Welcome to LearnSmart's newest training series presented by Udemy. I'm Amin Weezy, Director of Courseware Development for LearnSmart. We're thrilled that you've chosen LearnSmart as your preferred education provider. If we can be of any assistance to you throughout your training experience, please don't hesitate to use the course discussion board and ask for help. As part of this course, LearnSmart provides additional learning resources for offline use or to supplement your online learning experience. These resources are available from the View Resources section within the course and include crossword puzzles, flashcards, and other games, supportive PDFs to supplement the course viewing experience, and other helpful tools and resources. Thank you for selecting this course from LearnSmart. If you enjoyed this course, or if this course helped you in your career, please let others know by rating it. It is with the support of our customers like you that we're able to continue creating great new courses. Thank you.
Many of the health and safety programs and procedures in this course are derived from Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA regulations. This course will provide some background information regarding OSHA and OSHA standards, inspections, citations, and penalties. The intent of this course is to distinguish between the role of OSHA and the role of the Office of Environmental Health and Safety, EHS. OSHA regulations cover many activities at colleges and universities. Although OSHA regulations were written specifically for employees, particular health and safety programs and the application of specific OSHA regulations are described within the sections of this course. The Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA Act of 1970, was passed by Congress to assure so far as possible every working man and woman in the nation safe and healthful working conditions and to preserve our human resources. Under the OSHA Act, OSHA was established within the Department of Labor and was authorized to regulate health and safety conditions for all employers with few exceptions. Under the OSHA Act, OSHA was created to encourage employers and employees to reduce workplace hazards and to implement new or improve existing safety and health standards, provide for research in occupational safety and health, and develop innovative ways of dealing with occupational safety and health problems. Establish separate but dependent responsibilities and rights for employers and employees for the achievement of better safety and health conditions. Maintain a reporting and record-keeping system to monitor job-related injuries and illnesses. Establish training programs to increase the number and competence of occupational safety and health personnel and develop mandatory job safety and health standards and enforce them effectively. The OSHA standards fall into two major categories: general industry and construction. These standards may require the adoption or use of one or more practices, means, methods, or processes reasonably necessary or appropriate to provide protection on the job. It is the supervisor's responsibility to become familiar with the applicable standards and to ensure that employees follow procedures, including the use of personal protective equipment as required. Where OSHA has not announced specific standards to address a given situation, employers are responsible for following the intent of the OSHA Act's General Duty Clause. The General Duty Clause states that each employer shall furnish a place of employment which is free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to its employees. In those cases where a specific standard does not exist, OSHA will use the General Duty Clause for the issuance of citations and fines. A standard, it publishes these intentions in the Federal Register as a notice of proposed rulemaking or often as an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. The notice will include the terms of the new rule and provide a specific time for the public to respond. Interested parties may submit written arguments and pertinent evidence and may request a public hearing on the proposal when none has been announced in the notice. After close of the comment period or public hearing, OSHA must publish in the Federal Register the full final text of the adopted standard and the date it becomes effective, along with an explanation of the standard and the reasons for implementing it. Departments are responsible for keeping employees informed about OSHA and about the various safety and health matters with which they are involved. OSHA requires that each department post certain materials at a prominent location in the workplace. These include job safety and health protection, informing employees of their rights and responsibilities under the OSHA Act, summaries of petitions for variances from standards or record-keeping procedures, and copies of OSHA citations for violations of standards. These must remain posted at or near the location of the alleged violations for 3 days or until the violations are abated, whichever is longer. Occasionally, OSHA Standards or NIOSH, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, research activities will require an employer to measure and record employee exposure to potentially harmful substances. Employees have the right, in person or through their authorized representative, to be present during the measuring and to examine records of the results. Each employee or former employee has the right to see his or her examination records and must be told if exposure has exceeded the levels set by the standards. The employee must also be told what corrective actions are being taken. OSHA is authorized to conduct workplace inspections to enforce its standards. All establishments covered under the OSHA Act, including Princeton University, are subject to inspection by OSHA compliance safety and health officers. Under the Act, an OSHA compliance officer is authorized to enter without delay and at reasonable times any factory, plant, establishment, construction site, or other areas, workplace, or environment where work is being performed by an employee of the employer, and to inspect and investigate during regular working hours, and at other reasonable times, and within reasonable limits and in a reasonable manner, any such place of employment and all pertinent conditions, structures, machines, apparatus, devices, equipment and equipment therein, and to question privately any such employer, owner, operator, agent, or employee. Nearly all inspections are conducted without any advanced notice. However, when advance notice of an inspection is given, the employer must inform all employees, representatives, or arrange for OSHA to do so. OSHA usually does not have a warrant for an inspection when they first arrive and may not conduct warrantless inspections without an employer's consent. It may, however, inspect after acquiring a search warrant or its equivalent based on administrative probable cause. If an OSHA compliance officer contacts anyone via phone or email, contact EHS. EHS will assist the department in determining what steps, if any, need to be taken. If an OSHA compliance officer arrives at your department to conduct an inspection, the following procedure should be followed. Ask the compliance officer for credentials, a badge, or identification card specifying that the person is an agent of OSHA. Ask whether the compliance officer has a warrant for the inspection. Do not demand a warrant. Simply inquire whether one exists or not. Before an inspection, the compliance officer will conduct an opening conference during which the compliance officer explains why he or she is there and what he or she wishes to do. Ask the compliance officer to wait while you assemble the appropriate people for the opening conference. Contact Public Safety and EHS to inform them about the arrival of the compliance officer. Do not begin the opening conference without a representative from EHS present. After the opening conference, the compliance officer will conduct a walk-around inspection. EHS and department representatives must accompany the compliance officer during the inspection. If affected employees in the department are represented by a union, ask employees to designate a union representative to be present during the inspection. After the inspection, department representatives and EHS will meet to discuss the outcome and plan for action as needed. If a notice of violation is received, it must be posted in the area of the offense for at least 3 days. Any fines issued by OSHA are the responsibility of the department. Consult with EHS and the Office of General Counsel before paying fines. In order to have the most effective inspection, the following suggestions should be considered. Answer any questions truthfully without directly admitting fault. Never knowingly give false statements or intentionally mislead a compliance officer. If you do not know the answer to a question, explain that you are not certain and that you will look into the matter further as necessary. Do not offer information unless asked for it. Do not talk about accidents or incidents that have occurred in the past unless specifically asked to do so. Be courteous. Do not be rude to the compliance officer or argue with him or her. Do not discuss political views regarding OSHA or the federal government. There are 5 types of inspections that OSHA conducts. These are listed in their order of importance as determined by OSHA. Imminent danger situations are given top priority. An imminent danger is any condition where there is reasonable certainty that a danger exists that can be expected to cause death or serious physical harm immediately or before the danger can be eliminated through normal enforcement procedures. When an imminent danger situation is found, the compliance officer will ask the employer to voluntarily abate the hazard and to remove endangered employees from exposure. Should the employer refuse, OSHA will apply to the nearest federal district court for legal action to correct the situation. Second priority is given to investigation of fatalities and catastrophes resulting in hospitalization of 3 or more employees. Each employee has the right to request an OSHA inspection when the employee feels that he or she is in imminent danger from a hazard or when he or she feels that there is a violation of an OSHA standard that threatens physical harm. If the employee so requests, OSHA will withhold the employee's name from the employer. This is the third type of inspection. OSHA establishes programs of inspection aimed at specific high-hazard industries, occupations, or health hazards. Workplaces are selected for inspection on the basis of death, illness, and injury rates, employee exposure to toxic substances, and the like. Establishments cited for alleged serious violations may be re-inspected to determine whether the hazards have been corrected. This is the 5th type of inspection. After the OSHA compliance officer reports findings to their office, the area director determines what citations, if any, will be issued and what penalties will be proposed. The types of violations and penalties which may be proposed are: other than serious violation, a violation that has a direct relationship to job safety and health but probably would not cause death or serious physical harm. The maximum proposed penalty for this type of violation is $7,000. Serious violation, a violation where there is substantial probability that death or serious physical harm could result, and that the employer knew or should have known of the hazard. The maximum proposed penalty for this type of violation is $7,000. Imminent danger situations are also cited and penalized as serious violations. Willful violation, a violation that the employer intentionally and knowingly commits. The employer either knows that the operation constitutes a violation or is aware that a hazardous condition exists and made no reasonable effort to eliminate it. The penalty range for this type of violation is $5,000 to $70,000. Repeated violation, a violation of any standard, regulation, rule, or order where, upon reinspection, another violation of the same previously cited section is found. Repeated violations can bring fines of up to $70,000. Failure to abate. Failure to correct any violations may bring civil penalties of up to $7,000 per day for every day the violation continues beyond the prescribed abatement date. Other regulatory violations and penalties include: falsifying records, reports, or applications can bring a fine of $10,000 and/or 6 months in jail upon conviction. Violations of posting requirements can bring civil penalties of up to $7,000. Assaulting a compliance officer or otherwise resisting, opposing, intimidating, or interfering with a compliance officer in the performance of his or her duties is a criminal offense, subject to a fine of not more than $5,000 and/or 3 years in jail, and conviction of a willful violation that has resulted in the death of an employee can lead to individual fines of up to $250,000 and/or 6 months in jail, and corporate fines of up to $500,000. Determine which OSHA regulations or standards apply to areas or functions of your department. EHS may assist in this determination using the Department of Health and Safety profile. Your department should review the status of the applicable health and safety programs and regulatory compliance. Your department needs to develop an action plan to address any deficiencies or problems and ensure supervisors understand and enforce the requirements of the applicable standards. Periodically conduct self-audits of the safety programs within the department. Contact Public Safety and EHS if an OSHA inspector calls or arrives for inspection. Any incident resulting in 1 or more fatalities or hospitalization of 3 or more workers must be reported to OSHA within 8 hours of being informed of the incident. Contact EHS or Public Safety immediately upon learning of such an incident. EHS will report the information to OSHA. Supervisors should become familiar with the program and regulatory requirements for operations under your supervision. Enforce any requirements. Periodically conduct self-audits of the safety programs under your supervision. Report all safety concerns to the department safety manager. The EHS assists departments in conducting a departmental health and safety profile. Assist in developing programs and procedures within the departments. Provide training and other assistance as needed. Assist departments in addressing specific health and safety concerns. Assist departments during OSHA inspections. Assist in preparing a response to any OSHA citations or concerns. Report incidents to OSHA as appropriate. As an individual, you are responsible for following all health and safety guidelines and procedures. Wear personal protective equipment where needed. Report all health and safety concerns to supervisors, departmental safety managers, or EHS. Okay, here's something to think about. What are the two major categories that OSHA standards fall into? A. Universities and colleges. B. Safety and health. C. Employers and employees. And D. General industries and construction. The correct answer is D. OSHA standards fall into two major categories, general industry and construction. These standards may require the adoption or use of one or more practices, means, methods, or processes reasonably necessary or appropriate to provide protection on the job. Another thing to think about, OSHA does not need a warrant for inspections unless blank. A. They are courteous. B. They need samples. C. They need a nurse. And D. There is probable cause. The correct answer is D. OSHA usually does not have a warrant for any inspection when they first arrive and may not conduct warrantless inspections without an employer's consent. It may, however, inspect after acquiring a search warrant or its equivalent based on administrative probable cause. Many of the health and safety programs and procedures in this health and safety guide are derived from Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration OSHA regulations. Dangerous situations are given top priority. Report an immediate danger in any condition where there is reasonable certainty that a danger exists that can be expected to cause death or serious physical harm immediately, or before the danger can be eliminated through safety guidelines and procedures, and know ways to prevent it through personal protective equipment where applicable. Employers are responsible of training employees on this subject matter in an effort to reduce incidents.
Industrial hygiene is defined as a scientific discipline that anticipates, recognizes, evaluates, and designs controls for those environmental factors or stresses that occur in the workplace, which may pose a danger to life and health. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, known as OSHA, has developed standards to surround this discipline to ensure that all workers are protected. These standards are met with the guidance of industrial hygienists. Industrial hygienists are professionals who use environmental monitoring and analytical methods to determine the extent of employee exposure and implement engineering, work practice controls, and other methods to control potential health hazards in the workplace. In this course, we're going to look at the role of OSHA and industrial hygienists in keeping workplaces safe. We'll go over a brief history of industrial hygiene and identify different types of hazards and ways to protect against them. First off, let's look at the history of industrial hygiene. The environment and its relation to worker health was recognized as early as the 4th century BC, when Hippocrates noted lead toxicity in the mining industry. Industrial hygiene continued to evolve over the millennia, and by the early 20th century in the United States, Dr. Alice Hamilton led efforts to improve the application of industrial hygiene. She observed industrial conditions firsthand and startled mine owners, factory managers, and state officials when she proved that there was a relationship between employee illness and exposure to toxins. Dr. Hamilton also presented definitive proposals for ways to eliminate adverse and unhealthy working conditions. At about the same time, U.S. federal and state agencies started investigating health conditions in the industry. In 1908, public awareness of occupationally related diseases made the way for the passage of compensation acts for certain civil employees in the legislature. By 1911, states began passing the first workers' compensation laws. The New York Department of Labor and the Ohio Department of Health established the first state industrial hygiene programs in 1913. All states put into action these types of legislation by 1948, and as a result, in most states, there is some compensation coverage for workers who contract occupational diseases. The U.S. Congress has passed 3 landmark pieces of legislation related to protecting the health of America's employees: the Metal and Non-Metallic Mine Safety Act of 1966, the Federal Coal Mine Health and Safety Act of 1969, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, or the OSHA Act. Today, nearly every employer is required to implement the elements of an industrial hygiene and safety, occupational health, or hazard communication program, and to govern themselves according to the regulations of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, known as OSHA. Under the OSHA Act, OSHA develops and institutes mandatory occupational safety and health requirements, covering the more than 6 million U.S. workplaces. OSHA, among many others, depends on industrial hygienists to evaluate jobs for potential health hazards. In order to develop and institute mandatory occupational safety and health standards, these professionals investigate the extent of employee exposure to various types of hazards and decide what's required to control these hazards to protect workers. Industrial hygienists are trained to anticipate, recognize, evaluate, and recommend controls for environmental and physical hazards that can affect the health and well-being of workers. When there are workplace hazards or stresses that can cause sicknesses, impaired health, or significant discomfort in workers through chemical, physical, ergonomic, or biological exposures, the industrial hygienist must analyze, identify, and measure those hazards. The responsibilities of the industrial hygienist are to identify the hazards, conditions, and help eliminate or control them by applying the appropriate measures. Industrial hygienists make more than 40% of OSHA compliance officers who inspect workplaces throughout America. Industrial hygienists also play a major role in developing and issuing OSHA standards for the protection of workers who come face to face with health hazards associated with toxic chemicals, biological hazards, and harmful physical agents. They also provide technical assistance and support to the agency's national and regional offices. OSHA also employs industrial hygienists so that they can help to set up field enforcement procedures and technical interpretations of OSHA regulations and standards. Many companies also employ industrial hygienists to help ensure workers are protected against overexposure to toxic and physical hazards. One of the first steps an industrial hygienist must take is to conduct a worksite analysis. This helps them to determine what jobs, workstations, and other workplace conditions are the sources of potential problems. In the course of the worksite analysis, the industrial hygienist measures and identifies exposures, problems, tasks, and risks. The most effective worksite analysis include looking at all the jobs, operations, and work activities. The industrial hygienist inspects, researches, or analyzes how specific chemicals or physical hazards present on that work site may impact worker health. If a situation that may present a health hazard is discovered, the industrial hygienist makes a recommendation of what the appropriate corrective actions or controls should be. Here's a question for you. When were the first industrial hygiene programs established in the U.S.? Is it A, 1908, B, 1913, C, 1948, or D, 1969? The correct answer is B, 1913. In 1913, the first industrial hygiene programs were established by the New York Department of Labor and the Ohio Department of Health. By 1948, these types of legislations were put in place in all states. Industrial hygienists are familiar with the characteristics of hazards and can effectively recognize and evaluate on-the-job hazards. Possible hazards may include air contaminants or chemicals. There can also be biological, physical, and ergonomic hazards. We'll look at each of those in more detail later on in the course, but first let's look at the key means of protecting against them. Industrial hygienists recognize that engineering, work practice, and administrative controls are the primary ways to reduce employee exposure to occupational hazards. Engineering controls minimize the possibility of employee exposure by either reducing or removing the hazard at the point of origin, or removing the worker from the hazard. Engineering controls include getting rid of toxic chemicals and replacing them with non-toxic chemicals, confining work processes or work operations, and installing general and local ventilation systems. Work practice controls change the manner in which a particular task is done. Some fundamental and easily implemented work practice controls include changing current work practices to follow proper procedures that minimize exposures while operating equipment, regular inspection and maintenance of process and control equipment, implementing good housekeeping procedures, providing good supervision, and establishing rules that prohibit eating, drinking, smoking, chewing tobacco or gum, and applying cosmetics in regulated areas. Administrative controls are important to the proper function of workplace because they set parameters by controlling employees' exposures to hazards at the management level. This type of control can be implemented by way of scheduling production and tasks, or both, in ways that minimize exposure levels. A good example would be a way that an employer may schedule operations so that the highest exposure of potential is occurring during times when the least amount of employees are present. At times when effective work practices or engineering controls are not feasible, or while such controls are being put in place, the proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, must be used. Examples of PPE are gloves, safety goggles, hats, hard hats, safety shoes, protective clothing, and respirators. In order to ensure that an employee's PPE works properly, it must be suited to the individual and carefully selected, properly fitted, and fit tested periodically, carefully and properly worn, regularly maintained, and replaced as needed. Air contaminants are usually categorized as either particulate or gas and vapor contaminants. The particulate contaminants most commonly encountered include dust, fumes, mist, aerosols, and fibers. Dust are solid particles in the atmosphere. They are created by handling, crushing, grinding, colliding, exploding, and heating organic or inorganic materials such as rock, ore, metal, coal, wood, and grain. Fumes are gas, smoke, or vapor that has a potent smell and is dangerous to inhale. They're formed when material from an evaporated solid condenses in cool air. In most cases, the resulting solid particles react with the air to form an oxide. Mists are fine droplets of liquid suspended in the atmosphere. They're generated by liquids condensing from a vapor state back to a liquid state, or by a liquid state being scattered by splashing or atomizing. Aerosols or vapors are also forms of a mist characterized by highly respirable minute liquid particles. Fibers are solid string-like particles whose length is several times greater than their diameter. A good example would be the hazardous substance asbestos. Chemical compounds are harmful no matter what shape they take: solids, liquids, gases, mists, dusts, fumes, and vapors. Chemical hazards that are airborne exist as concentrated forms of mists, vapors, gases, fumes, or solids. Some can be toxic by absorption through the skin or through ingestion, and some are corrosive and can do serious damage to living tissue on contact. The level of employee risk due to exposure to any given substance depends on the nature and potency of the toxic effects and the amount and duration of exposure. Information on the risks to employees from chemical hazards can be obtained from the Materials Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. According to OSHA Hazard Communication Standards, often referred to as HAZCOM, it is required that the manufacturer or importer provide the purchaser of hazard materials an MSDS. The MSDS is a printed summary of the vital health, safety, and toxicology report and information or the chemical or ingredients of a particular mixture. The Hazard Communication Standard requires that all containers of hazard substances in the workplace have proper safety placards, warning, and identification labels so that employees are able to identify the hazard levels of a given substance. Biological hazards include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other living organisms that can cause acute and chronic infections by entering the body either directly or through breaks in the skin. Occupations that require employees to deal with plants, animals, or animal products, or food and food processing may expose workers to biological hazards. Employees with laboratory and medical occupations can also be at risk of being exposed to those biological hazards. Any occupations that lead to being exposed to bodily fluids pose a risk to workers from biological hazards. In occupations where animals are involved, exposure to biological hazards are reduced by preventing and controlling diseases and outbreaks in the animal population as well as properly caring for and managing infected animals. Risks can also be kept to a minimum by practicing effective personal hygiene and by paying particular attention to minor cuts and scratches, especially on the hands and the forearms. Employees must practice proper personal hygiene, especially in the hand washing, in occupations where the potential exists for exposure to biological hazards. Hospitals must provide proper ventilation, proper PPE, such as gloves and respirators, adequate infectious waste disposable systems, and the proper controls including isolation or quarantine in instances of contagious diseases such as tuberculosis. Physical hazards include exposure to excessive levels of ionizing, non-ionizing, radiation noise, vibration, illumination, and temperature. Where employees are at risk for exposure to ionizing radiation, time, distance, and shielding are important tools in ensuring that every employee is safe. Danger from radiation is increased with the amount of time one is exposed to it. Therefore, the radiation danger is lessened the shorter time of the exposure. Another important control against radiation exposure is distance, from both ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. From some sources, radiation levels can be estimated by comparing the squares of the distance between the worker and the source of the radiation. For instance, at a reference point of 10 feet from a source, the radiation is 1/100th of one intensity of 1 foot from the source. Shielding is also a method of protection against radiation exposure. The greater the mass between a radioactive source and the employee at risk, the lower the exposure of radiation. Unfortunately, there are some cases where limiting exposure to or increasing the distance from certain forms of non-ionizing radiation, like lasers, is not effective. For example, an exposure to laser radiation that's faster than the blinking of an eye can be very hazardous and would require that workers be miles away from the source of the laser in order to be protected adequately. Shielding workers from the radiation source is an effective method of control. Noise is another important physical hazard that can be controlled by various protective measures. Noise can be reduced by installing equipment and systems that have been engineered, designed, and built to operate and reduce noise levels. It can also be reduced by enclosing or shielding noisy equipment, by making certain that equipment is in good repair and properly maintained with all worn or unbalanced parts replaced, by mounting noisy equipment on special mounts to reduce vibration, and by installing silencers, mufflers, or baffles. Replacing noisy work methods with quiet ones is another very good way to reduce noise. For example, employees could use welding methods to attach parts instead of riveting them together, treating floors, ceilings, and walls with a quality acoustical material that can reduce reflected or reverberant noise. For areas where there are noisy operations, sound barriers can be put up to prevent noise from traveling to neighboring workstations, thereby reducing worker exposure to noise. It is possible to reduce employee exposure to noise by increasing the distance between the source of the noise and the receiver, by isolating employees in soundproof booths, limiting workers' exposure time to noise, and by providing hearing protection. Radiant heat exposure is another example of a physical hazard that employees encounter in factories, such as steel mills or where welding is performed, that can be controlled by installing reflective shields and by providing protective clothing as part of that necessary PPE. The science of ergonomics requires an analysis and evaluation of a vast number of tasks, including lifting, holding, pushing, walking, and reaching. Many ergonomic problems are the result of technical challenges, such as increased assembly line speeds, additional specialized tasks, and increased repetition. Some issues are the result of poorly designed job tasks. Ergonomic hazards include excessive vibration and noise, eye strain, repetitive motion, and heavy lifting problems. Improperly designed tools or work areas can also be ergonomic hazards. Simple repetitive motions or repeated shocks over extended periods of time, as in jobs requiring sorting, assembling, and data entry, quite often trigger irritation and inflammation of the tendon sheath of the hands and arms. This condition is known as carpal tunnel syndrome. Ergonomic hazards can be avoided primarily by the creation of a helpful and effective operational design of a job or a job site, and by enhanced designed tools or equipment that meet employee comfort and appropriate body positioning in the performance of his or her work. Through thorough worksite analysis, employers can set up procedures to correct or control ergonomic hazards by using the proper engineering controls, like redesigning workstations, lighting, tools, and equipment. Training employees in correct work practices, like proper lifting methods, practicing proper administrative controls, like shifting workers among several different tasks, reducing production demand, and increasing rest breaks, and providing and mandating personal protective equipment. Determining working conditions from an ergonomics perspective requires analyzing the complete physiological and psychological requirements of a given job on the employee. In general, industrial hygienists come up with ways that a well-designed ergonomic work environment can integrate enhanced efficiency, reduction of accidents, reduction of operating costs, and increased effective use of employees. Let's take just a second and think about this. Which of the following is not true of biological hazards? Is it A, biological hazards can cause infections by entering the body through breaks in the skin? B, workers in a food processing plant may be exposed to biological hazards? C, washing your hands is a good method of preventing illness from biological hazards? Or D, employees should review the material safety data sheet for information on the risks associated with biological hazards? The correct answer is D. Employees should review the material safety data sheet for information on the risks associated with biological hazards. The Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS, provides information on the risks to employees from chemical hazards. The MSDS is a printed summary of the vital health, safety, and toxicological information on the chemical or ingredients of a particular mixture. Industrial hygiene covers a vast number of subjects in the working environment. Early in its history, OSHA understood that industrial hygiene played an integral part of ensuring a healthful work setting. It's paramount to use the application of industrial hygiene concepts in its health standards and as a tool to effectively enforce job safety and health regulations. By recognizing and applying the basic values of the industrial hygiene to the work environment, the workplace will become healthier and safer.
Think about the number, 170 billion. That's certainly not a small number. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, 170 billion is how much occupational injuries and illnesses cost U.S. businesses each year. Despite these large numbers, OSHA believes that workplaces can reduce these costs up to 40%. That sounds great, but how can businesses achieve this? The answer is through effective safety and health programs. OSHA has used its experiences from real worksite evaluations to develop standards and guidelines to reduce work-related injuries and illnesses. OSHA standards require compliance. OSHA guidelines, however, are optional but highly recommended. In this course, we're going to examine these voluntary guidelines. We'll talk about why organizations should implement safety and health programs and what must be in place in order for these types of programs to be effective. By the end of this course, you'll recognize the benefit of an effective safety and health program and be able to list the 4 key elements. Whether you're a business owner looking for ways to improve costs and workplace safety, or a worker interested in learning more about how a safety and health program can benefit you, this course will provide you with the information that you need. Let's begin by discussing the 3 main benefits of an effective safety and health program: reducing work-related injuries and illnesses, improving morale and productivity, and reducing workers' compensation costs. So exactly how prevalent do you think work-related injuries and illnesses are each year? According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, there were nearly 3 million non-fatal workplace injuries and illnesses in 2011. That's 3.5 cases for every 100 full-time workers. Additionally, there were more than 4,600 fatal work injuries in the same year. A work-related injury or illness can be devastating for a family. A disabling injury can cause workers to lose 40% of their incomes over a 5-year period. That doesn't take into account the suffering experienced through increased stress, conflict, and even divorce. By implementing safety and health programs, the number of work-related injuries and illnesses can be greatly reduced. Through OSHA standards, millions of injuries and illnesses have been avoided, and more than 75,000 lives have been saved since 1970. Let's look at the second benefit of the effective safety and health programs: improved morale and productivity. We've established that implementing this type of program decreases injury and illness. The result is a safer, more reliable workplace. In this improved environment, there's often an increase in employee satisfaction and morale. These work environments are frequently rated better places to work. Improved employee morale often leads to increased productivity. According to an OSHA report, a Fortune 500 company was able to increase productivity by 15%, while a smaller 50-person plant was able to save more than $265,000, all because safety and health management systems were implemented. Think about it. Fewer injuries and illnesses mean fewer missed work hours. Each year, lost productivity from injuries and illnesses cost companies $60 billion, which is a number that OSHA is committed to reducing with the help of safety and health programs. The third benefit of safety and health programs is a reduction in workers' compensation costs. These are the direct costs of accidents, which cover medical costs and disability payments for an injured or ill worker. A 2012 study by Liberty Mutual found that workers' compensation costs amounted to a total of $51.1 billion. There are also indirect costs to consider, such as the cost to train and compensate replacement workers, repair damaged property, investigate the accident, implement corrective action, and maintain insurance coverage. In fact, did you know that indirect costs are often 9 times greater than the direct medical and disability costs? Additionally, there are costs related to the schedule delays, added administration time, lower morale, increased absentees, and poor customer relations. The best safety and health programs are composed of 4 crucial elements: management commitment and employee involvement, worksite analysis, hazard prevention and control, and safety and health training. Management commitment and employee involvement is essential for a safety and health program to be successful. People from every level of the organization need to be involved so that a culture of safety and health is truly instilled. What might that culture look like? It would be an environment in which safety and health on the job is an important goal to management, as important as other organizational objectives like cost control, quality, and productivity. In this type of culture, all the individuals within the organization must believe that they have a right to a safe and healthy workplace and accept personal responsibility for ensuring their own safety and health. Everyone within the organization must also believe that they have a duty to protect the safety and health of others. Another key element of a successful safety and health program is worksite analysis. This involves a rigorous investigation to identify and eliminate existing hazards or potential hazards. It focuses on the relationship between the work and the work site. The third component of a successful safety and health program is hazard prevention and control. Once a worksite analysis has been conducted and hazards or potential hazards have been identified, then the organization's management must follow through and ensure that these are corrected or controlled. If this key element is not carried out, then injuries and illnesses may continue to happen when they could have been avoided. In addition, management may lose credibility and workers may fail to notify them if new hazards arise. The fourth and final element of an effective safety and health program is safety and health training. Before hazards can be identified, employees and managers must know what the hazard is. Training is essential in providing workers with a means to identify hazards and to take appropriate action when dangerous situations arise. When a safety and health program has commitment from management, the safety and health of all employees is a fundamental value of the organization on a whole. Management demonstrates concern for every aspect of the safety and health of all workers. This demonstration of concern takes shape in two primary forms. First, management is the authority. Managers need to be the motivating force behind both the program and the employees. Second, management must provide the necessary resources for organizing and controlling the program's activities. Management needs to create a clear and concise worksite safety and health policy with goals and objectives. This information then needs to be communicated to all the members of the organization. In an effective program, managers are also involved in the program's implementation. Each year, the program's operations must be reviewed so that deficiencies are identified and revised as needed. All groups in the organization, including management, must be held accountable for meeting their responsibilities. Now let's transition to the second part of this element, employee involvement. Employees need to be involved in the program and in the decisions that affect their own safety and health. When employees are involved, they develop and express a commitment to the safety and health for themselves and fellow workers. They know what their responsibilities are because management has clearly communicated that to them. So what are some examples of ways that employees can get involved? Some can be on an inspection or hazard analysis team. Others might help with the development or revision of safe work rules. Some employees might be great at training new hires, and still others may be adept at assisting in accident investigations. In any case, be aware that both management commitment and employee involvement complement each other. One's not effective without the other. A plant manager can be totally committed, but if employees follow blindly or are not involved, problems will only be solved temporarily. Let's take a little break for a second. Which of the following costs can be associated with worksite injuries and illnesses? A. Medical costs. B. Increased absenteeisms. C. Poor customer relations. D. Added administrative time. Or E. All of the above. The correct answer is E. All of the above. Work-related injuries and illnesses have direct costs, including medical costs associated with workers' compensation. However, there are also indirect costs to consider, including increased absenteeism, poor customer relations, and added administrative time. Additional indirect costs include those to train and compensate replacement workers, repair damaged property, investigate the accident, and schedule delays. Let's dive deeper into the second element of successful safety and health programs, worksite analysis. The purpose of a worksite analysis is to examine the work and the entire worksite to identify existing hazards. It also identifies conditions in operations where hazards might be created. Management has to be active in analyzing the work and worksite in order to anticipate and prevent such harmful occurrences. Management should also provide the resources and authority needed for employees to identify hazards and then to eliminate them or control them. There are 5 main components of a worksite analysis. 1, a comprehensive baseline survey. 2, routine job hazard analysis. 3, change analysis. 4, periodic and daily safety and health inspections. And 5, additional worksite analysis. A comprehensive survey is the first part of the worksite analysis. This serves as a baseline for safety and health at the worksite. If you're a small business, there are OSHA-funded state-run services to conduct the survey at no cost. There are also workers' compensation carriers, insurance companies, and various consults that offer expertise to evaluate safety and health hazards. There are several parts to a comprehensive survey. A preliminary job hazard analysis should be conducted as the basis for the survey. Job hazard analysis is the process of studying and recording each step of a job, identifying existing and potential job hazards, and determining the best way to perform the job to reduce or eliminate the hazards. This should be conducted with all facilities, processes, material, and equipment. Depending on the type of worksite, industrial hygiene surveys should be conducted to inventory chemicals and hazardous materials, assess potential exposures to chemicals, physical and biological hazards, review hazard communication programs, and analyze air samples. Noise levels, respirator programs, and ergonomic risk factors should also be surveyed, depending on the industry. Once you've completed the comprehensive survey, you need to note and make sure that new hazards do not arise through ongoing analysis. That's where the next element of a worksite analysis comes in, routine job hazard analysis. We've already conducted a job hazard analysis in the comprehensive survey. However, we all know that jobs can change over time, so this analysis needs to be performed routinely so that new hazards can be identified and remedied. The third component of a worksite analysis is change analysis. Change analysis should be conducted anytime a new element is added into the workplace. A new element might be a new piece of equipment, materials, or a process. The purpose of the change analysis is to review these new elements in order to prevent possible hazards associated with them. The fourth component of a worksite analysis is safety and health inspections. These should be conducted regularly, both weekly and daily, in order to catch hazards that may have been missed at other stages of the analysis. In fact, successful workplaces ensure that every location, including offices, is inspected at least once every calendar quarter. In-house inspectors should be trained to recognize and control hazards. There should also be a reliable system in place so that employees can notify management about hazardous conditions without fear of reprisal. Responses must be timely and appropriate. Inspections should cover every part of the worksite. The best way to perform this type of analysis is through a checklist that's based on past problems, industry standards, input from involved parties, and your company's safety practices. Any hazards that are identified should be tracked until they are corrected. This way, information can be used to improve the hazard prevention and control program, which we'll discuss later in the course. The fifth component includes additional worksite analysis. One such analysis is accident investigation. Accident investigations, which include near-miss accidents, need to be conducted to identify causes and means for prevention. All parties involved in an accident need to be thoroughly interviewed so that the following 6 key questions can be answered: who, what, when, where, why, and how. In addition, injury and illness trend analysis should be conducted so that common cause patterns can be identified and prevented. The most common form of pattern analysis can be found through a review of OSHA injury and illness forms. But other records of hazards can and should be analyzed for patterns, including inspection records, workers' compensation claims, and employee hazard reporting records. The third element of safety and health programs is hazard prevention and control. This deals with remedying existing and preventing future hazards identified through a worksite analysis. All identified hazards need to be eliminated in a timely manner. If the hazard cannot be eliminated, hazard controls must be used, also in a timely manner. The best way of preventing and controlling hazards is through engineering controls. Engineering controls focus on controlling the hazard at its source through the design of the work environment and job itself. Safe work practices is another control method. This method includes your company's general workplace rules and other operation-specific rules. These practices need to be communicated through training, positive reinforcement, correction of unsafe performance, and enforcement. Another way to prevent and control hazards is through administrative controls. This is meant to reduce employee exposure to hazards through exercise breaks and the rotation of workers. Administrative controls are often used in conjunction with other controls. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is a supplementary method of control that is used when hazard exposure cannot be engineered out, when other forms of control cannot provide sufficient protection, or in emergency situations. PPE accomplishes hazard control through clothing or equipment. PPE is always the last level of control, not the first. Other ways to prevent hazards include maintenance of facilities and equipment. In the event that accidents do occur, proper preparation needs to be in place. Emergencies should be planned for, with training and drills as needed. There should also be a medical program in place. First aid should be on site, and a physician and emergency care should be nearby. Now that we've discussed some components of an effective safety and health program, we need managers to commit to these programs and provide leadership in order for personnel to analyze the worksite for hazards, and for those hazards to be eliminated and controlled. However, before any of this can be done, workers, managers, and supervisors involved need to be trained on how to accomplish this. Training is the backbone of any safety and health program. The scope of the training is dependent upon the size and complexity of the involved hazard and worksite. It should be incorporated into other training programs and job performance assessments. This training needs to address the safety and health responsibilities of all personnel. Employees need to understand the hazards that may be exposed to and how to prevent harm to themselves and others. Training should be provided for new hires, contract workers, employees who wear PPE, and workers in high-risk areas. When new processes or materials are in place, long-term workers affected by those changes need to be trained as well. Managers and supervisors must also understand their safety and health responsibilities and should also be included in the training plan. Training for managers should emphasize their important role in visibly supporting the safety and health program and setting good examples. Supervisor training should cover company policies, procedures, hazard detection and control, necessary physical protections in work areas, accident investigation, handling of emergencies, how to train and reinforce training, and how to motivate, facilitate, and recognize worker involvement. Other specific training needs may exist. For instance, the entire workforce needs periodic refresher training in responding to emergencies. Training for hazard recognition, standard compliance, accident investigation, and emergency drill should also be in effect. Let's consider this scenario. A new company has hired 2 experts to conduct worksite analysis. The first contractor, John, is conducting inventory of chemicals and hazardous materials. He's also analyzing air samples. The second contractor, Mandy, is studying and recording each step of the jobs performed on the site in order to identify existing and potential hazards. She's also determining the best way to perform the job to reduce or eliminate hazards. The information both John and Mandy acquire will serve as the baseline for safety and health at the workplace. What component of the worksite analysis is Mandy conducting? Is it A, comprehensive survey, B, routine job hazard analysis, C, change analysis, or D, periodic safety and health inspection? The correct answer is A, comprehensive survey. John is conducting an industrial hygiene survey, while Mandy is conducting a job hazard analysis. The information acquired from both John and Mandy will fall under the comprehensive survey umbrella because the data will serve as the baseline for the company's safety and health standards. Routine job hazard analysis is conducted after a comprehensive survey has already been completed. The purpose of the routine job hazard analysis is to identify hazards that might have arisen due to changes in the job. Change analysis is performed anytime a new element is added into the workplace. Periodic safety and health inspections are performed to catch hazards that may have been missed at other stages of the analysis. In this Safety and Health Programs course, we've discussed benefits of having effective safety and health programs, including reduced work-related injuries and illnesses, improved morale and productivity, and reduced workers' compensation costs. We also looked at the 4 elements of effective safety and health programs. We looked at what it means to have management commitment and some of the responsibilities that this group must perform. We also looked at the importance of employee involvement and a few examples of how to get them involved. We defined and identified the 5 key components of worksite analysis, including a comprehensive baseline survey and routine job hazard analysis. We also looked at the hazard prevention and control and the different ways that you can ensure hazards are eliminated or controlled at the worksite. And finally, we examined the need for safety and health training for all members of the organizations, from employees to supervisors to managers.